Little girl asked, "Can you fix our door?" Mommy's scared. The CEO next door showed up at midnight. The rain had been falling steadily for 3 hours when Marcus Kane heard the knock on his front door. It was just past midnight, and he'd been reviewing quarterly reports in his home office, still wearing a suit from the board meeting that had run late into the evening. At 52, Marcus had learned that unexpected midnight visitors rarely brought good news. He set down his reading glasses and walked through his quiet house, the kind of spacious, well-appointed home that came with being the CEO of a successful tech company. Through the frosted glass panel, he could make out a small figure standing in the rain. When he opened the door, his heart skipped a beat. A little girl, no more than 4 years old, stood on his porch in a pink dress and beige jacket. Her blonde curls were damp from the rain, and her sneakers were muddy. She held a lollipop in one hand and looked up at him with eyes that held more worry than any child should carry. "Please," she said in a small voice, can you fix our door? Mommy's scared." Marcus immediately crouched down to her level, his businessman instincts giving way to simple human concern. "Where's your mommy, sweetheart?" The little girl pointed across the street to the house he'd barely noticed since moving into the neighborhood 6 months ago. It was smaller than most on the block, with a chain-link fence and modest landscaping. In the darkness, he could see a dim light glowing from inside. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. "Emma," she replied. "The door won't close right, and Mommy says bad people could get in. She's really scared. And I heard you come home and I thought, maybe you could help. Because you're big and strong." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. This child had crossed a street in the dark, in the rain, at midnight because her mother was afraid. What kind of situation were they in? "Okay, Emma," he said calmly. "Let's go see what we can do. But first, does your mommy know you came over here?" Emma's face fell slightly. "She's trying to push the couch against the door. I thought I could help her by getting help." Marcus stood and held out his hand. "Let's go together then. I bet your mommy is very worried about you." They walked across the quiet street, Emma's small hand trusting in his. As they approached the house, Marcus could see through the front window a young woman, probably in her late 20s, struggling to move a piece of furniture toward the door. She was slight, with long blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a gray sweater. Even from outside, he could see the tension in her movements. Marcus knocked firmly but not aggressively on the door frame, since the door itself was hanging oddly on its hinges. The woman spun around, her eyes wide with alarm. And then she saw Emma. The fear on her face transformed into relief mixed with panic. She rushed to the door, pulling it open as much as the broken hinges would allow. "Emma, oh my God, Emma, I told you to stay in your room." She pulled her daughter close and Marcus could see her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," Emma said into her mother's sweater. "I went to get the man from across the street to fix the door." The woman looked up at Marcus, then really looked at him, taking in his expensive suit, his polished shoes, the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her expression flickered between embarrassment, relief, and uncertainty. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. "Marcus Kane. I live across the street. Emma said you needed help with your door." The woman hesitated, her protective instinct clearly at war with her need for help. "I'm Sarah," she finally said. "Sarah Mitchell. I'm so sorry she bothered you. I didn't know she'd left. I was just trying to secure the door and I thought she was in her room." "She didn't bother me," Marcus assured her. "And she was right to get help. May I take a look?" Sarah stepped back, still holding Emma close. As Marcus entered, he could see the full extent of the problem. The door's frame was splintered near the lock, and the hinges were pulling away from the old wood. It looked like someone had tried to force their way in. The house itself was small but clean, furnished with mismatched pieces that spoke of thrift stores and hand-me-downs. Children's drawings decorated the refrigerator, and a stack of books sat on the coffee table, next to what looked like nursing textbooks. "What happened here?" Marcus asked, examining the damage. Sarah's voice was quiet. "My ex-boyfriend. He came by earlier tonight, drunk, demanding money. When I wouldn't let him in, he tried to force the door. He gave up when the neighbor's lights came on, but the door's been like this since. I tried to fix it, but I don't have the right tools. And I can't afford to call anyone until I get paid on Friday. And that's 3 days away. And I just keep thinking, what if he comes back and I can't keep Emma safe?" The words tumbled out in a rush, and Marcus could hear the exhaustion and fear beneath them. He thought of his own daughter, grown now and living in Boston, and how he would have felt in Sarah's position, helpless to protect his child. "I can fix this," he said firmly. "I have tools at my house. Will you be okay if I go get them?" Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't usually accept help from strangers, but I didn't know what else to do." "You're not accepting help from a stranger," Marcus said with a slight smile. "I'm your neighbor. I should have introduced myself months ago." He jogged back across the street, the rain soaking through his suit jacket as he retrieved his toolbox from the garage. When had he last used these tools? His ex-wife used to tease him about buying expensive equipment he never touched. But his father had taught him basic repairs years ago, and some skills you never forgot. Back at Sarah's house, he shrugged off his wet jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Emma watched from the couch, her lollipop forgotten, as Marcus worked on the door. Sarah hovered nearby, offering to help, apologizing repeatedly, until Marcus finally told her gently that she should sit down before she wore a hole in the floor. As he worked, replacing the splintered wood in the frame, reinforcing the hinges with longer screws, and installing a new deadbolt he'd found in his toolbox, they began to talk. Sarah told him she was a nursing student, working nights at a diner to make ends meet. Emma's father had left when she was a baby. The ex-boyfriend had seemed kind at first, but had turned controlling and volatile. "I kept thinking I could fix him," Sarah said quietly, glancing at Emma, who had dozed off on the couch. "That if I just loved him enough, was patient enough, he'd change. Turns out some things can't be fixed. Some doors need to be kept shut." Marcus paused in his work, thinking of his own failed marriage, of the warning signs he'd ignored, because he'd been too busy building his company. "That's hard wisdom to learn," he said, "but important." "You married?" Sarah asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that's too personal." "Divorced," Marcus replied easily. 10 years now. Married to my job, according to my ex-wife. She wasn't entirely wrong. They were quiet for a moment. The only sound, the rain against the windows and Marcus's tools against the door frame. "This ex-boyfriend," Marcus said carefully, "has he been violent before?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. "There are resources," Marcus continued. "Legal protections. I know some good lawyers. No charge, just friends of mine who do pro bono work. I can't afford—" "Sarah," Marcus interrupted gently, "I said no charge. And I'm also going to give you my number. If he comes back, you call me first, then you call the police. I'm right across the street. 2 minutes away." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you being so kind?" "You don't even know us." Marcus thought about that question as he tightened the final screw on the new deadbolt. Why was he helping? He could have called the police, pointed Sarah toward social services, gone back to his warm house and his quarterly reports. But Emma's small face looking up at him in the rain, Sarah's exhausted fear, the reminder that real life happened beyond boardrooms and profit margins. It had touched something in him he'd thought long buried under years of corporate success. Because someone should have been kind to you before now, he finally said. And because Emma was brave enough to ask for help when she needed it. That took courage. He tested the door, opening and closing it several times. It was solid now, secure. The lock clicked firmly into place. There, he said with satisfaction. Nobody's getting through that without making a lot of noise. And I added a chain lock up here, see? Extra security. Sarah stood and tested the door herself, her relief visible. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Marcus began gathering his tools. But I do have one request. Sarah looked at him warily. Let me give you my number, he said. Not for anything weird, he added quickly, seeing her expression. But because neighbors should look out for each other. And because I travel a lot for work, and it would be nice to know someone's keeping an eye on my house too. It was a small lie, that last part. His house had a security system that would alert Fort Knox, but Sarah needed to feel like this was an exchange, not charity. She nodded slowly. Okay, that seems fair. They exchanged numbers and Marcus picked up his jacket. It was nearly 2 in the morning now. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. At the door he turned back. Sarah, I mean it about the lawyers. And if you need a reference for anything, housing applications, whatever, I'm happy to help. Being a single parent is hard enough without people judging you for past mistakes. How do you know I'm not the mistake? Sarah asked, a hint of defiance in her tired voice. Marcus smiled. Because Emma asked a stranger for help in the middle of the night. Kids that age, they reflect how they're raised. She's polite, brave, and trusting. That tells me everything I need to know about her mother. Sarah's tears spilled over then, and she quickly wiped them away. Thank you, she whispered. Really, thank you. Marcus walked back across the street through the drizzle, his expensive suit ruined by rain and sawdust, his hands dirty from repair work. He felt more awake, more alive than he had in months. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself checking on Sarah and Emma regularly. He brought over groceries he claimed were extras from his bulk shopping. He happened to have tickets to a children's theater show that he couldn't use. His assistant had apparently ordered too many Girl Scout cookies, and would Sarah mind taking some off his hands? Sarah saw through most of his excuses but accepted the help with growing grace. In return, she brought him homemade meals, insisted on shoveling his walk when it snowed, and Emma drew him pictures that he found himself displaying in his home office. The ex-boyfriend came back once more, late on a Thursday night. Sarah called Marcus first, as he'd asked. He was there in 90 seconds, still in his pajamas, and stood on Sarah's porch while they waited for the police. The ex took one look at Marcus's size and cold expression, and decided whatever he wanted wasn't worth the trouble. Marcus made sure the restraining order Sarah filed was processed quickly. He also happened to mention to a friend in the DA's office that there was a case worth looking into regarding domestic violence and stalking. As winter turned to spring, Marcus realized his house didn't feel as empty anymore. Emma's laughter from across the street, Sarah waving as she left. For class, the knowledge that someone might need him for something more important than quarterly earnings. It had filled a void he hadn't known existed. One evening in May, as he was grilling burgers in his backyard, Sarah and Emma appeared at his fence. We made you something, Emma announced proudly, holding up a lopsided ceramic bowl. I made it in art class. Mommy said you could put your keys in it. Marcus accepted the bowl with all the solemnity it deserved. This is perfect, he said seriously. I've needed exactly this. Sarah smiled. We also wanted to invite you to Emma's kindergarten graduation next month. I know you're busy, but she's been telling everyone about her friend Marcus who fixed our door. And I thought maybe if you could come. "I'll be there," Marcus interrupted. "Wouldn't miss it." As he watched them walk back across the street, Emma skipping ahead while Sarah turned to wave, Marcus thought about the night a small girl in a pink dress had knocked on his door. He'd thought he was going to fix a broken lock, but what he'd really done was open a door he'd kept closed for too long, the one to his own heart. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage come in the smallest packages. Sometimes fixing what's broken requires more than tools and technique. And sometimes the richest rewards come not from boardrooms and balance sheets, but from simply showing up when someone needs you. That midnight knock had changed more than a door. It had changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about everyday kindness and human connection. And leave a comment telling us about a time a neighbor or stranger helped you when you needed it most. Your stories inspire us to keep sharing hope.